Imagine you're in the middle of building your dream home when your builder rings to tell you that the tile you've selected for your master bathroom is out of stock and it won't be available for at least another month. He shows you two alternative tiles that are both available now. One is roughly the same price as the one you previously chose, but it isn't as nice as the original. And the other one is twice the price, but ticks the looks box. How do you choose? When you're renovating your home, you're going to encounter decisions like this all the time. And you're going to have to make choices and compromises along the way. Because no matter the size of your project budget, even if your budget is one Kim Kardashian would be happy with, you're still going to have to make some difficult decisions. The truth is that all home building projects will have competing project constraints, and it might be time or cost, and it might even be quality or even the availability of resources or the desired scope of work. The real question is, how do you balance the ever-changing demands of a project when you're constantly having to make decisions that affect all of these constraints? And that's what I'm talking about in today's video, how to balance the demands of a project so that you're happy with the end result. I'm going to share with you how these project constraints might impact each other and how you can identify which factors are most important to you so that you can then communicate your priorities to your project team and ensure a successful project. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm the founder of the Zen Reno, and I help homeowners confidently start, navigate through, and nail their home renovation or new build projects, and have fun and exciting experience getting a home they love living in, and are proud to show off to their family and friends. Remember the scenario I mentioned at the start of this video? The bathroom tile you chosen that was out of stock, and you had to choose between the two tiles, one that was the same price but wasn't as nice as the original one, or the tile that was twice the price but ticked the looks box. Look, the way I see it, you've got three choices. The first is to wait 4 weeks and use the tile you originally selected, but this would increase the time frames and possibly add overhead costs to your project. Or you could sacrifice looks and go with the tile that isn't quite as nice but keeps the project on time and on budget. And finally, you could use the more expensive but nicer tile that keeps the project on time but increases the budget. So how do you choose? The real question is, how do you balance the ever-changing demands of a project when you're constantly having to make choices that affect all of these constraints? Well, to answer this question, you need to understand how these project constraints might impact each other and how to identify which factors are more important to you so you can communicate your priorities to your project team and ensure a successful project. Have you ever heard the saying time, cost, quality, which would you like? Because you can't have all three. It's a project management concept that applies to home renovation. The three constraints most commonly encountered on a home renovation project are time. And this is the time frame you want or even need your home to be planned or designed or built within. And the third one is quality, which refers to the fixed set of expectations or quality or even the scope of work that you want to get done. And the relationship between these three constraints is commonly referred to as the iron triangle or the triple constraint or the balance triangle or a multitude of other things. But what it really means, there are three sides to a triangle. It's a triangle. And if each side is assigned a specific constraint, time, cost, or quality, then the main premise behind the iron triangle is that none of these constraints is standalone. They are all interrelated. So if you change or prioritize one, then another will be impacted and will change as a result. It goes a little something like this. Let's start with quality. You can get the project done well, and we refer to this as good. And in relation to time, you can get the project done fast. And lastly, there's cost. You can get the project done cheaply. But here's the kicker and where the iron triangle kicks in. You can't have the project done well, fast, and cheap. You can't have your project built well, built fast, and built cheaply. You have to pick two at the sacrifice or compromise of the third. And here's what I mean by this. You can build your project fast and of good quality, but it will cost more because better quality materials are expensive and so are more resources and staffing to build faster. Or you can build your project fast and cheap, but it will be of a poorer quality. Corners may be cut in order to get the job done faster. And done faster, in addition to this, cheaper materials may need to be substituted. Or you can build your project cheaply and of good quality, but it will take more time. Your team may use fewer resources or staff to build a project of good quality, meaning it takes longer. These competing constraints are most apparent when you're in the middle of a project and someone introduces new constraints or requirements, like the out of stock scenario we talked about at the beginning. Remember the tile scenario. Your options were wait 4 weeks and use the original tile selected, which equated to good and cheap but not fast, or sacrifice the looks and use the tile that doesn't look as nice, which equates to cheap and fast but not good, or use the more expensive or nicer tile, which means good and fast but not cheap. So how do you make decisions like this, especially in the middle of a project when you're feeling overwhelmed and under pressure? Well, ideally you want to have a good understanding before you start of where your priorities lie. And this is why it is so important to start your project really clear on what you want to achieve and why, and what your personal goals and priorities are right from the get-go. Only you can know which of these constraints are the most important to you and what you value, and to a large extent the specifics of your project directly influence these constraints and determine which are the most important and of the highest priority to you, and therefore which your project team should focus on. Which is why it's really important to be crystal clear, not to mention consistent, in explaining and communicating to your team what each of these constraints means to you. By defining these constraints, it's not always black and white, however. What is good and what is cheap can be defined many different ways. And when you think about it, they're actually really subjective. So will vary from person to person and project to project. So think about what these terms mean to you and what your project goals are. And if you think about quality, a reduction in scope or quality of work is never a really easy conversation, but scope is often one of the most flexible items if you really get down to it. In many projects, design features are not necessary and can be altered or substituted, and it can still be possible to achieve your project goals. When it comes to time, though, this constraint is usually more rigid than any quality constraints. You may have a set date in your mind, for example. It might be a milestone in your life, a birthday or a baby, or you may be restrained by living circumstances. So many people try not to budge on your time things, but if you do have flexibility in your schedule, it's sometimes better to let the time frame slide a bit to achieve better quality, or even stay on budget with the given materials already selected. Money is probably the most sensitive aspect of any project. Many people fail to realise exactly how much money is required to build a project, not to mention all the soft costs and unforeseen conditions that can eat up your contingency budget. There's also an escalation in market trends that it can impact projects as well that are hard to quantify at the start. And it really boils down to where your priorities lie. And ultimately, it comes down to you to decide what the most important priority is, and then let everyone else know, because all decisions will be based on these three competing elements. Again, you can optimize for two at the expense of the third, but you can't maximize all three at once. The key is to set good project goals at the beginning of the project and let those goals guide your future decisions. And when a decision comes, make sure you're armed with all the information. So gather all the relevant information, and referring back to the tile example above, I would start by asking for more info to get a rough idea of the extent of the possible impact. I would want to know how much more in total dollars the nicer tile would cost to install. I'd also want to know the cost and the time impact of staying with the current tile given the 4 week delay. Could other work be done in the meantime so the full 4 weeks isn't lost? Maybe it's just an extra 2 weeks. And what would the cost of extending the schedule be for those 2 weeks? All this information would impact my decision. And if I knew it would only be a few $100s more for the nicer tile, I may actually go with it. But if it's much more than that, like thousands more, I may not. Just because it costs more may not mean it will break the bank, but without having all the information, it's really hard to make the best decision. It's also worth noting that every decision may not result in prioritising the same project constraint over the others. You may not always choose to prioritise cost or time over quality. Maybe you may continue to choose that beautiful splashback with the long lead time or delivery date, even though you've been concerned about the time frame from the start of your project. It's your decision. Just make sure you have all the information and evaluate each decision based on your overarching goals and objectives for your project. When a decision isn't dictated by your goals, weigh the pros and the cons and choose what's most important to you for that specific situation. Choosing between quality and cost and time is hard. There's no denying it. It's a project as personal as your home. You have a lot invested and it can get really emotional. Making the right choice begins with setting good project goals and sticking to them as you gather information and make decisions throughout the entire process. So be clear on what you aim to achieve, and communicating that to your team is the key. The better you're able to focus on that, the better your chances are for success. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss future episodes, and feel free to let us know how we're doing. We're always listening. If you've hit any topic ideas you'd like us to delve into, drop us a line. I'll pop the contact details into the show notes. Until next week.